Yeah, let's go through a rhythm part. These rhythm guitar demonstrations seem to be popular. So let's go through a live version of Rock and Roll Damnation from '78 and then talk about it a little bit. Okay. Okay. I've done some lessons kind of for people who are kind of on that cusp between beginner and intermediate level, and there seems to be demand for that kind of video. So I think this is another one of those where there are a few things to master and figure out. The first thing to figure out, though, is what key is it in when you're listening. When you first listen and you're trying to get what's the first chord of it, when you first sit down to try and figure it out. And AC/DC is one of those bands where, especially the Bon Scott period, where if you're trying to play along with them, the tuning seemed to be all over the place, because most of their songs are in A or E, some occasional G. There's B in there sometimes, but not many beyond that. There aren't many that are in C or D flat minor. So knowing what we know about the way they usually do things, if you hear a first chord that is like A flat, or one that's E flat, a good guess is they're probably in A or E, and the tape was slowed down or sped up, or they just tune that way if that's where Bond's voice was on a given day. So getting the actual tuning of it, because I'll post a song and then, one that's slightly off from standard pitch or something, and people say, what is that tuned to? And my answer usually is, I don't know, and I don't even care. If I'm sitting down to play along with something and learn it, it doesn't matter where my guitar starts out tuned when I take it out of the case. I'm tuning to what they're tuned to. So once you find that first chord or what key it's in, or an identifying chord, even if it's not the first one, sometimes it's the second chord. You go, oh, that's a D, I can tell, because they're doing, when you hear something that you can identify. Then I just tune to where they are. Rock bands or pop music, the tuning is not consistent, and you don't need to know, like, is that 440 or is it 410 or whatever it is. There are people out there, if you're one of those people, good for you, that care about that and even know that stuff. I couldn't care less. Don't even want to know anything about it. Don't care where they're tuned. I'm going to tune to match them, and the rest I don't care about. So that's my approach to it. Especially because if you're cranking them out in volume, I'm doing a bunch of videos in any given week. I got guitars that are tuned all over the place to match stuff that I've learned from. So when I pull out of the case, I have no idea whether it's 440 or not. And like I said, I don't care. So, okay, so this one, the first thing you hear is they do a G before the song starts. But when they get into it, you hear. Now, for this one, there's a couple things that tell me that they're playing it with A shapes. First is the riff itself. That clearly is A. He's doing it in A shape. He's not doing that. And he's not doing it here. He's not doing that. He's in A. So as soon as I hear the very first note, I know that's an A string. Whether it's tuned to standard, again, don't care. I don't want to know. But I'm just going to tune to whatever they're in, and I'll match them. So it starts with this D string at 7, G at 9, B at 8. The next one is like a little D thing with D, G, and B at 7. Two of those. And then into the main riff. Now that's a suspension that eventually, if you play enough and listening to music is important. If you want to play AC/DC songs and play like them, you got to listen to a lot of their stuff. It seems obvious to say that, but it's a question you get. If I want to play AC/DC songs, what would you recommend I listen to? People ask that. Listen to what you want to play and try to play the stuff. If I wanted to play Eric Johnson stuff, I would have started listening to that 25 years ago, whatever that was. But I don't want to play that, So I've listened to all the stuff that I want to play. So you'll get familiar with it. Now you should recognize this thing. You'll recognize that suspension. It's stupidly common. It's all over the place in rock. So it's an A. You suspend the D string 2 frets up and the B string 1 up. Now, if that looks familiar, sounds familiar, if you're a Stones fan, it's the same old suspension that Keith does in open G all the time, except this one's in standard tuning and it's an A. But up 2 on the D and 1 on the B, that's a very common suspension. So you'll get almost sounds like a Skinner kind of riff. reason why for playing, you know, blues-based rock, you want to learn to do your A with one finger, your A5 chord anyway. Even a full A you can do like that. Problem is, it can be hard to get, especially on a guitar like this where the action's so high. It can be hard to get that, hard to get the high E open because your finger will end up muting it. That's okay if it does. Most hard rock tunes are A5s anyway, so you don't really need that E string, but something to work on. And then the chorus is another sort of, this is going to sound like I'm knocking AC/DC. I'm not. I love them, especially the Bond stuff. Everything's golden as far as I'm concerned. But very typical thing, G, D. Another thing that's common, especially for AC/DC. Take a chance, D, while you still got a choice. What else is different in there? Okay, well, one thing, you know, sometimes I'll watch other people's lessons on things and to try to get an idea of, you know, what's already out there. Is it worth me explaining something if someone else has already done it, a good job of it? You know, like Heartbreaker, the Zeppelin thing. There's no point in me doing that. There's guys who do that so well. They do it literally, you can't tell it from Jimmy Page. You know, when I do Heartbreaker, it sounds like Keith Richards doing Heartbreaker. It's not the same thing. So it isn't worth me doing it. But I saw an AC/DC video where the guy was saying one thing about AC/DC that is very identifiable is they do all things power chords, you know, they do all these power chords and they don't do like if they do an E, they're just going to do it as an E5. You never hear that G string at the first fret for that G sharp. No, you don't hear. That's exactly wrong. That's totally wrong. The one identifiable thing about Malcolm's rhythm playing is that you do hear the full chord. You do hear those thirds in there, in their chords, and that's like when what's it gonna be? You do hear that note. You hear the third note in all of their stuff almost. So the thing that sets them apart is that they don't just do fifth chords and power chords. They do the full, or at least Malcolm did. Yeah, they do the full chords. That sort of defines the rhythm guitar of AC/DC, in my opinion. So things like that, that's why I'm doing this stuff, because other people might be, you know, there's nothing wrong with other lessons, but sometimes, and I do it too, sometimes you get steered the wrong way. What else is there? It goes back to that break in the middle. But I don't think there's anything really to it other than that. There's no real soloing except for in the outro, and but if you're just doing a guitar part all the way through, give a listen to it. The only chords of D, this thing, G, and then the D. That's all the chords. That's all the parts of it. And this. That's the whole tune. One to learn from start to finish, all the way through it. Without stopping and without having to think. Get to the point where you can hear a song like that. Like if you were at a bar gig, the goal is if you're at a gig and in between sets the guitar player gets his arm broken in a fight, they need somebody. You should be able to look at the set list of a typical classic rock thing and just say, yeah, okay, count it off. This is one of those. You ought to be able to play this under any circumstances, just start to finish without thinking. So work on that and get to that point. Good luck.